I now invite the Special Rapporteur on the right of Indigenous people to make an introductory statement. Mr. Barume, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, colleagues, friends, representatives of Indigenous people, it is an honor to address you today in my first appearance before this committee of the United Nations General Assembly as the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right of Indigenous people. I chose to dedicate this first report to the right of Indigenous peoples to land, territories, and resources because of its importance for Indigenous people. This is an interim report. It outlines activity undertaken during my mandates, and it provides a foundational understanding of Indigenous peoples' land rights. The final report will be presented next year after regional consultation. I take this opportunity to thank all of those, including many states, that responded to my call for contributions. In today's presentation, I will focus on three important aspects of Indigenous peoples' land rights. First, what is the uniqueness of Indigenous peoples' collective right to land, territories, and resources? Indigenous people's right to land, territory, and resources differ from those of other groups for several reasons, including two major ones. First, these rights are founded upon the principle of self-determination, which is recognized as one of the most robust norms within international human rights law. These rights are inherent to the existence of Indigenous peoples as nations and organized societies that predate colonization. They do not derive from state recognition or authority, but from ancestral control, ownership, and sovereignty which precede colonizations. Not all groups have such ancestral pre-existing land rights. Secondly, Indigenous peoples' land rights are rooted in the norm against racial discriminations, another international principle that has become part of general international law. Indigenous people have faced and continue to face severe or high-grade racial discrimination that has been used to dispossess them of their land. They were and they continue to be dehumanized or demeaned as savage to justify the occupation and ownership of their ancestral land. Again, not all groups can claim to have lost their ancestral land due to such high grades of racial discrimination. Second, the increasing global demand for Indigenous peoples' land is driving a rise in their criminalization. It is important to recognize that two realities exist side by side. First, most Indigenous peoples now live on the remaining part of their ancestral land after having been pushed back for decades. With no remaining territory or land to push back to, they are now increasingly responding to new threats and incursions against their lands. Second, a global demand for Indigenous people is driven by carbon markets, expansion for protected areas, and other conservation measures to 30% of national territory, the green energy transition, and the rush for rare minerals. Some observers estimate that over 50% of energy transition projects are located on or near Indigenous peoples' land. The combination of these two realities has led to a disturbing rise in the persecution and criminalization of indigenous peoples. Arbitrary arrest, torture, enforced disappearances, militarization, and killing are among those human rights violations indigenous people are facing on a daily basis. I therefore call upon states to restore the commitment made under the UN Declaration on the Right of Indigenous People. Those who defend these rights must be recognized not as adversaries, but as allies in the pursuit of justice and human rights. Excellencies, last but not least, indigenous peoples' land, territory, and resources are untapped potential for national and international security. As outlined in my report, recognizing and securing indigenous people ownership and control over their ancestral territory would enhance national and international security. Across all regions, land and territory of indigenous people are located in borders areas and even across borders. They are often at the front line of armed conflict, climate change-related displacement, drug trafficking, terrorism, violent extremism, migration route, geopolitical competition, and other international security issues. These are complex web and of threats and factors that indigenous people deal with on a daily basis using their traditional knowledge. In numerous instances, the presence of indigenous people and their traditional knowledge have functioned as initial line of defense against illegal activities, including smuggling, trafficking, mass migration, and unauthorized incursions. Through active surveillance of their territories, indigenous people have contributed to maintaining the integrity of national border and international security. Indigenous people have indeed been contributing to international security, but their effort remained unrecognized. I'm calling upon states to shift the paradigm and to see the potential of protecting indigenous people's land with a view to contributing to national and international security. Allow me to finish this presentation by calling for particular attention to the situation of indigenous people in the current global context, where human rights face serious challenges. Indigenous people remain among the weakest section of our society, and they will continue to be disproportionately affected if human rights is to be eroded. Let us reaffirm our collective commitment to transform this standard into reality, ensuring that indigenous people's voices are not only heard, but lead in shaping solutions to our shared culture. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on the right of indigenous people. I will now open the floor for any questions or comments to Mr. Barume. As per past practice, I would like the delegation to limit their comments to 2.5 minutes. I thank you for your kind cooperation.